Hi, and welcome back to video number 4 in our Ironheart multiplayer overview. This is the final video, and we're going to take a bit of a look at encounters here. So, story circuits from Ironheart Solo are returning in Ironheart multiplayer, but this time they're taking a bit of a different shape. So, I'll hand over to Charlie, who will explain a little bit about this to us. Charlie, how are story circuits working now?
So story circuits before in Ironheart multiplayer, we classified them as peaceful, protective and dangerous. And that is an element that is returning here. But we wanted to provide more variance within story circuits where story and the threat within them could evolve and change and become different over time. So the way that we've started to structure things now is that story circuits still encapsulate your kind of overall story. But within those, we have encounters. And these are things that can be played out on a hex map or in the theatre of the mind, but also carry those characterizations of peaceful, protective, and dangerous. So an example of let's take an example story circuit that we might play.
Okay.
So within this story circuit, say we've arrived on a planet and there is a kind of ecological disaster that's taking place, the climate is changing, and a whole settlement is having to up sticks and move to a different part of the planet in order to save their homes. So you're accompanying that caravan, maybe you're helping them kind of get set up and you're helping them pack up and gather stuff with a bit of a timer because the storm's about to hit. That would, for me, would be a perfect example of a peaceful encounter. There isn't a tangible threat on the map that's moving around. There isn't something that actively moving that you're having to defend the people from. It's more you're having to interact and engage with the people, examine their lives, work with them in order to get things moving and make sure that they're safe. Peaceful encounters can also kind of be very devoid of threat and be more roleplay heavy. But just because something is peaceful doesn't mean it's completely devoid of threat for the people you're working with. So in terms of that could be our first peaceful encounter. And then our caravan is getting on the move. And this is when we could roll really nicely into a protective encounter where our ecological disaster is getting worse and suddenly we have floods, torrents of water coming down and threatening to slam into the caravan, and you're going to need to divert these water flows, make sure you're ushering the people along, moving these water flows on the map, re-diverting kind of rivers that are bursting their banks to keep these people safe as they move from point A to point B. And that would be a great example of a protective element. Now I'd say our final dangerous element is moving people with all of their belongings, with all of their goods, with all of their valuables, can be very dangerous when it comes to people marauding around, potential raiders, people who are willing to kind of take advantage in this post-war climate and try and rob people. So this caravan could come under attack, and your pilots and mechs are going to have to fight back against these gangs of raiders who are trying to rob the caravan and run away with all of their goods. And then finally, we could resolve that story circuit really nicely where we land at our destination, you help the people get set up in their new home, and we see basically the results of all of those encounters, peaceful, protective or dangerous, carry them forward and bring it to a nice resolution. And this doesn't mean that like within a story circuit everything has to have an encounter. We could pepper in the classic story circuit elements that you're used to, where it is more role play led, it's more discussion led, more character led, but then alternate that with encounters as well. And that's how we're kind of envisioning story circuits. Is they encapsulate so much more now because multiplayer is pulling in so much more.
So the story circuits themselves, they're not necessarily a peaceful, then a protective, then a dangerous encounter. It could be a purely peaceful story circuit, or it could be a big high-stakes, more dangerous story circuit. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. So you could play a story circuit that only has peaceful encounters in it in its entirety, or just dangerous. But what we didn't want to do was make it so story circuits could only be one of those three things. And only contain one of those three things. So that's the big difference, is now you can mix and match. There'll be stories that will be entirely peaceful story circuits with multiple parts to them that are entirely protective, entirely dangerous, but also mixes of all three.
That's great. And obviously in the game we have it's very cozy vibes.
Yeah.
Despite the fact you have big rocket launchers strapped
Yeah.
to the shoulder of your mechs. So do these encounters always require you to engage in combat?
No, really, we encourage it for you to actually think about how these encounters can be resolved in interesting and different ways that aren't resorting to violence. I mean, sometimes you may feel that's necessary, and in cases that is totally fine. But like, let's go back to like our dangerous example again, where the raiders are trying to rob this caravan of people escaping a disaster. We could approach that completely differently and try and intimidate the raiders with our presence. We could actually plead with them and kind of actually maybe see an empathetic link there of that maybe these raiders are raiding because they are suffering from the same disaster and have had their homes destroyed or in a point of desperation. So you could actually end that by being, let's put our weapons down and come join our caravan. You need help as well. We will help you. And it has a completely different vibe and feeling and ending to it in terms of how.
And that could lead to totally new adventures that you'd not even imagined when you went into it.
Exactly, new adventures, new allies, new friends, new enemies. How you resolve stuff really, really matters, and choosing the path of peace generally bears more fruit a lot of the time, I would say.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Charlie, for giving us a great overview of the game. Ironheart Multiplayer is live now on Backerkit when this video launches. It's full. There's 3 complete books in there. We've got miniatures, we've got accessories. There's loads of fun to be had. The art by Ben is as beautiful as it was in Ironheart Solo. We've had a lot of fun making this game. We can't wait for you all to see it. So go find the campaign, follow along, check the updates out. If you want to back it, it would be great to have you along on the journey with us. Any final words from you, Charlie?
If you've kind of enjoyed all these videos, thanks for coming along and checking out the world of the Astral Union. We can't wait to see what kind of peace you find amongst the stars for yourselves and what adventures you and your mechs will go on.
Perfect. It's bye from me.
And bye from me.